The following is a local resident producer's program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to Eye on Oshkosh. Cheryl Hentz here along with Dan Rylance, and we're very pleased on this edition to be joined by our brand new city manager starting the beginning of August. I think it's like August 4th or something like that, Mr. Mark Rohloff. And welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thank you.
We hope that this will be one of many appearances over the course of many years.
I certainly hope at least, fortunately the latter, I hope to believe.
You're currently the town administrator in the town of Grand Chute.
Right.
And how long have you been there, Mark?
I have been in Grand Chute 11 and a half years.
Okay.
Have a 25-year career in local government.
Okay.
At least on my first day in Oshkosh, that'll actually represent my 25th anniversary in local government.
Well, congratulations on that.
Yeah, it's kind of neat.
And you spent some time in California as well, and just before we started taping, you'd mentioned that you were in Colorado for a while too. So tell us a little bit about what you've done in previous communities.
Yeah, I've had a fortunate to be in a variety of different communities, starting in Fort Collins, Colorado, which was a college community, not unlike Oshkosh. Colorado State University's there. I had an opportunity to do my graduate internship there and then moved on to the city of Long Beach, California. And I was with the city of Long Beach about 5.5 years and moved my way through the ranks and became the senior budget analyst, assistant budget manager, as it were. Worked in the city manager's office there for a while. And then I decided to break out and see the world, and I went to Rancho Palos Verdes, California, where I was the assistant city manager for 3 years. And then I met a girl from Beaver Dam. And,
oh, really?
So that's why did you move to Wisconsin from California?
Yeah, there's a real gap in
There's a gap there. Well, not a gap in employment, just more of a gap in why'd you end up in Wisconsin? And my wife's from Beaver Dam originally. We met in Long Beach and decided one thing we had in common was we really wanted to get back to the Midwest. And we eventually made our way to Wisconsin through Berlin. So I'm familiar with the area. I've been in the general area since 1992. So I'm real happy to have made the transition from a small community in Berlin to Grand Chute. A lot of things going on there. A smaller community in terms of population, but a lot of things going on. And I'm really looking forward to the challenges that Oshkosh presents.
And we do have many, and we're going to be talking about those throughout the next 50 minutes or so. But congratulations on your appointment.
Thanks.
You know, very pleased to have you on board, and I think that you know, you've got your work cut out for you, but I hope that you'll do some really great things. So now that we've set the stage for greatness,
right? Gonna bring it back down a little bit, Joe.
Yeah, okay, bring me down.
You were quoted in the Oshkosh Northwestern, one of the articles that they did, that two of the things that you're most kind of setting your sights on right out of the chute will be helping to spur some economic development and developing or creating a vision for Oshkosh. And you know, the economic development one is a tougher nut to crack, so let's talk about the vision first. You know, vision, everybody uses that word, it's a buzzword these days. What, I mean, other than being Oshkosh on the water because of our locale, what do you see as a vision for Oshkosh?
Well, the vision of a community isn't what I say the vision of the community is. Really is trying to elicit what the community sees as the vision. Where do they want to be? What do you want to be when you grow up type of question. And I'm going to have to spend a lot of time when I first get here talking to people. Being part of this show gives me input and gives me ideas so that as I start to formulate ideas and make some recommendations to the council, they are not simply my views, but they're really a reflection of the community's views. And it's really important for me as city manager to get out in the community and find out what's going on. Clearly, I have to use the council as a guiding force in that because they're the ones elected by the people to set the vision for the community. So it's me just to kind of get a lasso around it and see what that vision might be. Certainly there are some things that the council told me through the interview process, and economic development was one of them. And part of that is you have to have a vision in order for you to have an economic development plan. I haven't used the word vision too much in the past, but that is definitely what I heard that the community was looking for. So I'm going to be taking a look at plans that have been developed and plans that perhaps have not yet been developed and work from there.
Okay. Did you have anything else on vision?
I think the community's ready for that concept. You know, you said you haven't used it or heard it much, but I think this community is ready for a different direction or for vision, and I think that's why it's sort of a pregnant word right now.
But you see what I mean in
Yes,
terms
I
of
do.
the community really has to
Right.
be part of it, because I can sit here and say on my first day, oh, I
Right.
think this, this, and this, and the reaction I think would appropriately be,
Right.
well, what do you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And I really need to find out what that is, and then it may not be everything that you envision for Oshkosh or you envision, but it's a combination of those forces to really bring that out.
And
Okay.
I think there'll be strong conflicting elements of vision.
Yeah.
If you saw the joint interviews that were done with all the candidates, I made a comment about we aren't going to agree on everything, and I heard a loud chuckle in the audience, and I was like, I think I got the group. They agree on something. They agree that they disagree on some certain things, but at least they understood. Yeah, we don't agree on everything, but you know, that's a good start.
That's a good observation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about economic development, because certainly that is a huge thing. The council's told you that's huge. I think one of the things you'll hear from citizens is that's huge. Certainly Dan and I think that's a huge thing as well. You know, we do have a director of community development, Jackson Kinney, and he's pretty much been the driving force of most, if not all, of the community development and economic development in the city. We've had, as you well know, Mark, a tough time developing our riverfront. We've seen some businesses leave. We've got a lot of empty boxes around town, that kind of thing. How do you see your role fitting in with Jackson Kinney's? You know, he is the director of community development, you're the city manager, you're his boss. How much of a role, or how much of your time, if you will you spend on economic development, and how will that kind of complement or dovetail with Jackson's job?
As city manager, I have a responsibility for every aspect of the organization, whether that's police, public works, community development. Those are all things that I have to be involved in. In terms of prioritizing things, the council has been very clear that economic development is an important issue. So yeah, I will be involved in that. My job is getting into the visionary part of it, just finding out from the community and working with the staff, with Jackson and his whole staff to get those types of things done. But economic development, as I pointed out last week when I talked to the Northwestern, there's a lot of elements to economic development that are not just in community development, and it really has to be a holistic approach to it. Specifically, I use the example of streets. We have to set good first impressions. When you are looking to encourage people to come to a community, they're not just looking at what's the industrial park look like and what incentives. Those are important, don't be
Right.
mistaken. But at the same time, if it's a proprietary type of business, they're looking to locate their kids here. What are the schools like? And what's the community going to look like? What are the roads like? I mean, those are things that are important, because as you drive through the community and you see how older areas of town are, that's how your street and your subdivision and your street and your industrial park's going to look in 20 years. And you really need to set, this is what it's going to be like in 20 years for you. And that's something that's why it has to be a holistic approach. They want to know the community's safe, so police is important, fire is important, all those things are important. Now, so I really use a collaborative approach with the departments, have all the departments involved, to making sure that things such as community prevention through environmental design is something that we've really stressed in Grand Chute. And having the police department at the table for development helps do those things so that there aren't problems down the road. The fire department is extremely crucial. You don't want to have problems down the road with, gosh, I wish we had thought of that when we originally built this building, and it doesn't do a lot of good when the only thing the fire department has saved is your basement. Taking advantage of using the resources of the fire department. And then community development obviously gets folded in, be it in inspections or zoning, doing things that make sure that when we build it right the first time.
Okay, so if what I'm hearing you say then is correct here, I think I'm hearing you say that in developing economic development, you're going to focus on all aspects of our infrastructure and sort of collaborate, if you will, with the various department heads, whether it be core services like police and fire, or traffic, public works, what have you, to make sure that everything sort of flows well in the long run.
We're selling a package when we talk about economic development, and all the economic incentives in the world aren't going to do the trick if we don't have other things. I remember years ago, somebody, it was when I was in Berlin, somebody ended up choosing to come to our community because he had a grandchild who lived with him, and his grandchild wanted to take German. Now, who would have thought that an economic development decision was based on the curriculum at schools? But in that case, it was a factor. It certainly wasn't the factor, but he said, I really like the fact that there's German in this school. Well, you never know those weird little things until you talk to people.
Yeah.
So it goes beyond even the city organization. It's knowing the schools, knowing what strengths the schools have, so that when we're taking them through town and they have a question about schools, you know something about the school district. So I'm going to be working with the school district when they get a superintendent.
Yes.
We'll have to work with that.
When?
And dealing with the school district on all those levels. And I've had a very good relationship with Fox Valley Technical College in Grand Chute. The Tech is a wonderful institution, and training employees for the workforce is a big thing, and the Tech does a wonderful job at that. Keeping that partnership going constantly, and then finding out from the business community, how are we doing? Are there any things we need to improve on? What would you like us to focus on? So often, especially in government, we do things the same way because that's the way we did it last year. And we have to take a look. Do we need to retool? Do we need to emphasize different services? And it's amazing the feedback you can get as you talk to the business community and say, you know what, we really need to focus on these services and emphasize that. And by that listening process, you really you learn a lot about your organization, but you also are able to be more responsive to your customers, for lack of a better term.
I had put down some things relative to the Oshkosh Area Economic Development Corp and Chamco and things like that, but they would probably be unfair at this juncture to ask you those, Mark, because you haven't started yet, and you haven't worked with any of these folks yet, and you don't want to just, before you're even out of the chute, be tearing down or being critical of something. But I'm gonna save those for when we have you back the next time, because then you'll have a chance.
Then I'll have to have some answers.
Yeah. But TIF districts. I want to talk about TIFs a little bit. I have long been of the belief that we overuse TIFs in the city of Oshkosh. It's a wonderful tool. There's no question about it. It's a great development tool. But it shouldn't be the only tool in your toolbox. You don't, a carpenter doesn't just have a screwdriver or a hammer in his toolbox. He has all kinds of things. And in a city, you guys are really, I think, trendsetters over in the town of Grand Chute, because townships can very rarely use TIF. And you've got Fox River Mall, you've got a lot of other wonderful development out there, and you've done it without benefit of TIF. And the other thing is, when you start using TIF and you keep using TIF and keep using TIF and keep using TIF, sooner or later you're TIF'd out. And then what do you do? So I think we need to, in this community, find ways to spur development without always falling on the use of TIF districts. But we don't see that with our community development director. We seem to always, it's held out there as a carrot. What can you do, or what do you plan to do to sort of change that mindset?
The criticism that you have could apply to almost every community that has TIF authority. It's a common criticism. It's not invalid. It's just more really taking a look at it. And I can't comment on it now. But one of the things that I do recall, and I created a lot of TIF districts when I was in Berlin, and because there's an old saying, if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem's a nail. Now, you don't want to necessarily go to that philosophy because all you're doing is swinging and you're not really doing the right thing. Sometimes it is a screwdriver that's the right tool. It goes back to the holistic approach, taking a look at everything. Grand Chute has a great benefit because of its location on the highway. We don't have a downtown. We don't have that that nucleus of economic activity that you need to maintain, you need to keep in place. That's a different challenge that I didn't have in Grand Chute that will be here. But we have some great assets that go with that. The university is a great asset that we can use. The riverfront is an asset that we can use. I recall our city management association in the state used to hold its winter conferences at the Pioneer Inn. I know what downtown Oshkosh is capable of doing. A lot of it's just bringing that back. With respect to TIF, there is a clause in the state statutes that sometimes gets overlooked, and it's the but-for clause. But for TIF, this development would not occur. And you have to take a strong look at that.
I don't think we have done that enough here.
Well, that's something that, I don't know that yet, and I have to take a look at that.
You'll learn it. You'll learn that.
But you do need to take a look at developments and does this need TIFing? Grand Chute could incorporate any time they want to. And people have asked, why not? And I said, when we really need TIF, we'll incorporate because we'll need to do it to save a certain area of town. Here, there are many areas that have some needs. We're going to have to be judicious in that. I don't know where the city is in terms of its TIF capacity. There are statutes that have limitations on that. And when it gets to the point where 1 or 2 TIFs could make the difference, we are going to have to decide which, in the scheme of things, has the highest priority. If we're already at that point, we're going to have to be very selective. If we aren't at that point, then we may get criticized because there may be a perception that we're overusing TIF. One of the advantages, if you have a successful TIF, you can close that one out and you can reuse that tool again. Those are the types of things I'll want to know from the staff. How are we doing? How are these TIFs doing closing out? Some of the TIFs haven't performed. That's
That's
not
part
a
of
secret.
Cheryl's frustration is we've had a lot of shows talking about failure of TIFs, you know, over the last couple of years.
You know, TIFs there are no guarantees with TIFs. There are no guarantees in anything with economic development. We're going to have to take a look and say, okay, is this a risk worth taking? They are somewhat risks. We become involved with the business community. If it was easy, everybody would do it. If businesses were easy, every business would grow and be successful, but that's not the way it is. But we have to take a look at those things and say, is this a good investment for our community dollars? Because the whole idea of TIF is you use that tax increment for so many years, and then once it's done and closed out, wow, everybody benefits.
Right.
The city benefits, the schools, the county, but
Exactly.
you know, everybody benefits. Well, the benefit for the city is that we get that to cover police and fire and public works because they're not available for that time. And our needs in those basic services are going to be there. The best TIF is the one that closes out the quickest.
You bet.
And that's not, and I don't believe anybody is going into this TIF, let's have a real good failure this time. You know, and so I think the staff is, in my heart, I believe that the staff is doing those things. And I'll make sure that that is the case as well.
All right. Go ahead, Dan.
I started off my first question, I was going to ask you the question, why Oshkosh? And then I read your letter of application, and you called Oshkosh, quote, an exciting career opportunity. So why is it an exciting career opportunity for you?
Well, part of it goes back to the discussion we had when I was talking about Fort Collins.
Okay.
You know, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and did my undergraduate work in St. Louis. So I was in big cities for the first 22 years of my life. And when I went to Lawrence, Kansas for graduate school and then went on to Fort Collins for my graduate internship, I was like, wow, I really love university communities. And even after I got over the fact that, wow, I'm old enough to drink and I can go out into the bars, it was more than just saying, oh gosh, it's a fun community because there's lots of kids. There was a cultural draw to university communities that I really liked. There were elements to that in Long Beach, but certainly with a city of 450,000, a university is really just another business in town. So I really enjoyed that experience I had in those university communities. So that was the exciting career opportunity that I really saw with Oshkosh.
And you have been an adjunct, haven't you, at UWO in
Yeah.
public administration?
Yeah, I taught municipal management and public finance over there.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun as well.
I hope you continue that.
Oh, we'll find out.
Yeah. Is the position of city manager changing? I used to teach 20th century American history, and the city manager was always a pillar of progressivism, the attempt by reformers to take local politics away from and have a manager, not a politician. But I've seen through this process that there is sort of an evolution where they want you to be more than just a bureaucrat city manager. They want you to be a leader. They want you to be an appointed rather than elected mayor. They want you to be involved. Does that make any sense as the transition?
Oh, yeah. There definitely has been a trend. You've got your history down on the whole reform movement that created the council manager form of government, which, by the way, is celebrating its 100th anniversary this year. Okay. So it's kind of exciting that those things are happening. And the city management profession has always considered itself part of the reform movement of local government, even though that reform movement started in the late 1800s. Right. But it has changed. There's no question about it. There's always been a talk about the line between policy and administration. Exactly. And I'm supposed to stay on the administration side, and the council's supposed to stay on the policy side. But in a modern political environment, there is a lot of gray area. And a lot of that's working with the council to make them aware of things that are going on the management side, so they're familiar with how are you carrying out these policies? Are they being carried out in a fashion that is, what's the word I'm looking for, responsive? Responsiveness is a huge issue, and it's a criticism of the council manager form of government. And you're going to hear me use that term because Wisconsin is somewhat unique in the country in how their city manager positions have been developed. Elsewhere in the country, the council manager form is really a function of home rule. In Wisconsin, it's built into the statutes, and it's very rigid. And it's so rigid, it actually gave, historically, city managers more power than city managers elsewhere in the country. That's one of the reasons why the council manager form is used so infrequently in Wisconsin. The position I have in Grand Chute and the position I held in Berlin were not those positions. Right. There are only about 20 positions in the state, and part of it is the imperfection in the state statutes. Of course, you're not ever going to get that change at the state level because nobody understands or really cares about it. But I like to keep emphasizing that in its purest form, it's the council manager form of government. And you really have to understand that the council members are still at the top of the chart after the citizens. The citizens give the power to them, and then they in turn say, okay, run the organization for us. You're the general manager. That's a really good term, a general manager, because that is really my role, and I view my role in that vein. There are politics involved, and to say that I don't get involved in politics is not necessarily lying, but perhaps naive. Yeah. There are politics that I'm going to need to get involved in. I have to stay out of it and be objective, but at a certain point, I need to give you my professional opinion. And if you agree with it and you don't, that doesn't mean that politically we're going to be now enemies.
No, politics is the art of government. We mix it up with partisan.
Yeah, and the idea is, the old saying, there's no Democratic or Republican way to pick up garbage. That's why the council manager form of government was created. I knew you were going to smile because the refuse issue. But that's the whole concept. Yeah. There is no partisan way to police or deal with fire. But there are partisan ways, perhaps, or there are at least different ways of view about how economic development should be approached. And those are the things that you need the council to give you some general direction, and then once that's done, then I can run with it. Having said that, and this is where the whole vision and leadership thing comes in. At a certain point, if things are stagnant, I'm there to give it a boost. To say, there's an issue over here. Has anybody noticed this? And you know, sometimes 7 people are not perfect. We're all humans, we all have imperfections, and we're also focused on so many different things. Council members constantly bring to my attention issues that I didn't know about. Hey, thank you. Conversely, I might be able to say, we really got to focus on this issue. And when we do that, I think we're doing our job. Is that leadership? I suppose it is. But the reality is that I have to be able to bring to the council's attention issues that are important for the community. Sometimes, and this is where it depends on your individual approach, at a certain point, if I see something that's not getting done, personally I'm going to reach a frustration level and say, we got to do this. We have to get this done. And I'll come forward with a plan and everything. Here's the policy, here's how we're going to administer it, and on down the line. And that's simply because I know it needs to get done, and I'll bring it forth to the council. But usually where it is, it's a combination of things. It's understanding where certain things need to get done, and knowing that I already know where you think about a subject because we've had a conversation 1,000 times. I know where you're coming from 99 times out of 100. I just hope I don't get the one wrong. But you get those 99 times. By the time you're done, even the council, even when there's disagreement on the council, there's not necessarily disagreement on goals. It's disagreement on how it's done. And that comes down to political philosophy sometimes. Some people feel government should be more involved or less involved. I try to keep an even keel to say, when is it appropriate for us to jump in because it needs help? Whether it's economic development, TIF, or some other thing we can do. If we can be more responsive, those are things.
I think one of the frustrations that I've certainly seen and heard about in this community is, you know, everybody keeps saying, we need a strong leader, we need a strong leader, we need a strong leader. Well, you're an appointed position. You're an appointed employee. You can be the strongest leader in the world, but if you can't convince a majority of the council to go along with something that you're recommending, then your ideas aren't going to come to fruition. And so my frustration is, you know, where does the leadership responsibility fall? I think everyone bears a responsibility for it, but you can't get, like I said, your ideas to move forward if that council majority doesn't agree with you.
Part of my role is to give the council options to look at. I've always been very careful not to corner the elected officials into a take it or leave it type of thing, because that really creates problems. Because even if they do what I recommended, or lack of a better term, what I wanted them to do, if I cornered them in, there is a sense of perhaps resentment that you made me do this. I really didn't want to do this, but you gave me no choice. And that is really where it comes to, look, there's a variety of options. Here are the implications of if we go this route. No answer is perfect. No TIF is perfect. You have to take a look at those things and say, here are the drawbacks of this one. There's drawbacks to every option. There's advantages to every option. Let's weigh them out. A, B, C, or D. Now, you may have, 2, 2, 2, 1, and then you get nowhere. Eventually, you keep saying, what did you like about this one? What did you not like about this one? And keep bringing it back, bringing it back, bringing it back. Eventually, you give them 2 options, but they've really come to that conclusion. These other options are still out there. I haven't cornered them then, but I've massaged the issue so that they're at a point where they can say, okay, we've ruled these other things out. This is what's before us. It's a process to help build consensus. And when you have a vision and you say, look, isn't that what we agreed to? Yeah. Okay, let's move towards that. And you get it's an evolutionary type of step. So that's how I approach. I've got to be careful. I don't want to show all my cards right at the before I get started.
We've got a few cards left.
Okay. But I may not have any left.
I want to go to a couple of more touchy, sensitive ones without pinning you down to specifics. Relationship to department heads. There is some dissatisfaction in this city, and it's fairly wide known with some of the department heads. You must have been made aware of that a little bit in the interview process, or not?
I was asked very generally, not
Okay.
that no one. I think from a professional standpoint, it would be inappropriate to say
Okay.
person X, and it was asked me as a general type of question.
What have you done in the past with department heads? Have you ever fired any department heads in all of these other jobs you've had?
Sadly, that has happened.
Okay.
It's a
Well, maybe not
process.
sadly.
Sadly,
Yeah.
it's never a situation. I've
Yeah.
had to fire people that I personally like.
Okay.
That's not fun. I've
Yeah,
had
I
to lay
understand.
off people as well, and when it's not an issue of performance. So that's an unfortunate part of work. That's just what happens.
Okay, in some hierarchical businesses, the new person coming in requests a letter of resignation for his support staff. You're not doing that here.
No. One of the things I've always been very proud of is taking an existing team
Okay.
and working to improve them.
Okay.
Football and baseball coaches, I like to take credit for being able to turn a team around. And I'm not saying I'm a turnaround expert, but at the same time, I take a lot of pride in giving the tools or giving them an idea that they can achieve certain things. Sometimes that involves me getting a little more involved in one area or another because they may need help. In some cases, it could be that there's been a hole dug, and how do you get that person out of that hole? So I really like to take advantage of the knowledge and expertise of an existing staff and see what we can do with what we already have before we start throwing away something and then say, oh gosh, I really lost something. Because when you do let somebody go, there is a loss to the organization. And I really believe that everyone starts with a clean slate. That may not necessarily be views of some people in the community, but for someone who's going to be in a leadership role, give them the opportunity to succeed. And do everything I can to make sure they succeed, because that's our goal in the first place. And I really view that as my job.
Do you bring an evaluation process training with you? You are going to have a process for these people.
Yeah,
aren't you?
well, first I'll take a look at what the process is.
Okay.
It hasn't been followed.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have the greatest process in the world if it hasn't been followed.
I understand.
And have people been honest with people about issues and what caused this problem. Sometimes bad things happen, but what was it caused by? Was it a factor of circumstances? Was it a factor of failing to do something? And a lot of it is maintaining relationships. Because it's government, a lot of it is maintaining relationships with people and making them feel that they're still part of the process. If you feel cut out of the process, you're going to be a lot less satisfied with even the end result. You may not want to admit the end result is as good as it was, and certainly when things go bad, it gives you plenty of opportunity to complain. And when things go wrong, and they've gone wrong in every place I've been, that's a natural part of an organization. You really take a look at it and say, why did this happen? And what can we do to prevent it from happening again? Then you can maybe go to the side and say, I need to talk to you about this issue. But the first thing you got to do is make sure it doesn't happen again and identify the causes of a problem, because that's how the organization does better. And my primary role is to the organization. So I'm going to make sure that the organization is in a position the next time that we don't trip over that same rock again.
I sense that there's a free rein that's operated in the past where department heads really do things without the city manager being.
Well, that was going to be my next question,
Yeah, go
too.
ahead.
We've had kind of, I think, in the past, we've had a city manager who was more hands-off than hands-on, and that may be his own particular style. I'm not sure that it worked so well in this situation. Do you, Mark, consider your management style to be more hands-on or hands-off?
It's funny. I was going to, before you asked the question, I was going to say, I don't know if I consider myself hands-on or hands-off, because I don't really know, and I can't really speak to any of my predecessors.
Right.
I understand.
But I can tell you what I am, and it's without answer, and hopefully answer the question. I really look the whole collaborative approach. Department head meetings are not just a matter of rehashing what happened at the last council meeting, but really getting input from every department, because I learned this in Long Beach. Long Beach had a very unusual program. The city manager, who was a graduate of Lawrence University, so he was actually had some Wisconsin ties and was city manager of Two Rivers. He had a program. There were 150 managers in the city of Long Beach. And every 6 months, he rotated about 30 of them. And he literally would put them in different departments. The theory being a manager is a manager is a manager. And I view every department head as a member of the management team. And it's amazing when you bring that approach that you'll find department heads giving each other advice, even though it's not necessarily their area of expertise. And I view that, so am I hands-on, hands-off? We're all hands-on, but we're all hands-off. I mean, we're not going to be meddling in your affairs, but we're going to help give you advice. So we rise as a team, we fall as a team. I can't emphasize that enough. And understanding what each department does. I make sure departments, keep me in the loop. Please don't let me find out from the newspaper or from a council member. I need to find out from you first, right or wrong, good or bad. And they'll know eventually what those things are. It's not that, there was a traffic light out the other day and we fixed it, we put a new bulb in. I don't need that level of detail. But if there's been a traffic light that's been consistently out for 3 weeks, yeah, you're gonna have to let me know, because if you don't, I can guarantee you that a resident or a council member or somebody else is gonna point it out. So I really look at the department heads as a team of colleagues working together. So I don't think that's a hands-on or a hands-off answer.
It's a kind of combination of both.
It is.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's middle of the road.
I've been in different size organizations, so I understand that in a large city like Long Beach, there was no way the city manager could get involved in everything. But it was amazing. I learned so much from him. That doesn't mean you don't have your fingers in aspects of the community, so you understand where there might be problems that you may not necessarily get through the formal chain of command. Sure. And the great thing about being in a small community is every once in a while, I was the guy who said, well, why don't you try that key on the computer? So it's a combination of things. Now, I'm not going to be able to do that as much here. As I go back up into large organizations, I recognize that my talents and my expectations are going to be, you're not going to be sitting there fixing a jammed up computer. But at the same time, I want people to know that when they have problems, big or small, we can get them solved. And we've got some great resources in the city, and I'll make use of those.
Okay. Last fall, Mark, some folks from La Crosse came through, and they put together. It was recently released, I guess, called a First Impressions report. You're familiar with it.
I read a little bit about it.
Yeah, it didn't paint us in that great of a light in many, many respects. And I won't ask you what you thought of the report, because you said you only read a little bit of it. But what do you see as our strengths, our assets in Oshkosh, and by the same token, what are our hindrances? What's our Achilles heel that's holding us back?
I don't know if there's a full Achilles heel, so I'll go to the strengths first. I still think we're in a great location. I think the waterfront does provide advantages, and not just because it's Oshkosh on the water, but there are certain elements of water that people still enjoy to this day. The university community is an asset to us. We have, even in this economy, we have a good industrial base, and that's pretty good. And we need to do what we can to maintain that presence in the community, because there are only so many jobs at a big box retailer or a fast food restaurant that are going to sustain a quality community. So keeping those jobs, like Oshkosh Truck, those are real important. And those are assets that we don't want to take for granted. The liabilities, well, every community that has a downtown struggles. It's how do you retool the downtown? And that's really what we're talking about. It's not going to be the huge retail mecca. The age of the big box retailers is really getting away with that. But that doesn't mean that retail cannot thrive downtown. It's just a matter of what type of retail, and that's where listening to the community. How can we retool the downtown to be a place where people want to go, But it may not just be because we're going down to the big box store, because we know where those are. They're out by the highway. And we don't want to forget the neighborhoods. The strength of our community lies in our neighborhoods, because that's where people live.
Well, along with that, we have, so many different issues, whether it's strengthening our neighborhoods, whether it's, building upon more development and getting that tax base up. Our roads, some of them, a lot of them are just in horrible, horrible disrepair. And I want to talk about those in a little bit. But, all these things that we have to improve upon, and yet shared revenue continues to dwindle. There's property tax levies in place. Fuel costs continue to go up. Health insurance costs continue to go up. All these things keep pulling at an already very tightly stretched dollar. And on top of that, you've got infrastructure that continues to have to be maintained so that it too doesn't fall in disrepair. So how do we, and here's the million-dollar question, how do we find the millions and millions of dollars that we need to do all those things without, overburdening the taxpayer?
You just gave me just a hopeless question to answer.
Give it your best shot.
We're not alone. I mean,
Yeah.
every community is
True.
going through that, and that's something we're all going to have to do. It's really going to be a matter of prioritizing services. I was asked a question somewhat similar to that during the interview process, and one of the things is we have to be careful of is when there's a new service or expenditure that's identified, we have to take a look at the long-term impacts of making a decision to make an expenditure. A new facility has maintenance costs. We have to be careful that we have those types of costs factored into the life cycle of this. Because if we don't, we're going to find ourselves 5 years from now, well, gosh, we have to start fixing this place up as well, or fixing this street up. Deferred maintenance is a huge problem that a lot of communities have, and it certainly is evident, and several council members mentioned that to me.
You don't have really a budget line on deferred maintenance, do you?
Well, you do and you don't, but
Yeah.
if you don't, you're really in trouble.
Right.
But it really is trying to, the very simple approach from the city manager standpoint is you take the number of miles of road you have, you take a look at the life of the road, and you divide the life into the miles of road and say, I got so many miles of road to repair every year. That's the real, simple approach. I have 6 or 8 miles of road to repair every year. You kind of got to stay to that schedule. When you fall behind, then you're playing catch up, and I'm sure we're probably in a catch up mode because most communities are.
I think we're probably worse off than
Yeah,
a lot of communities. And we have a road repair system that is kind of two-tiered. You've got the city, Department of Public Works, who decides certain city streets that are going to be repaired. And then you have a petition system where property owners in a certain block or a certain number of blocks petition the city to do their road. Do you see that? Have you worked under such a system in the past, and do you see that as a good thing?
Well, one of the concerns you have with the petition system is that you're relying on the residents to become experts in the condition of their road. And when the residents start noticing the condition of the road, it's probably too late. They don't view an alligator crack in the road as a problem. And because it isn't, you're driving down the road, it doesn't really cause trouble.
Right.
But that alligator crack becomes an opening for water, and Dave Patek can tell you those things, and I'm sure he has. It's really going to be a matter of educating the public and using these shows to really educate the public on why we're doing what we're doing, because when we start getting tons of potholes, it's already too late. I mean, for that road.
Yeah, we have tons of potholes.
But once you fall behind,
Yeah.
it's harder to catch
I
up.
understand. Cold mix doesn't work.
Yeah, cold mix works the day it's
right.
applied.
Yep.
And so those are things that we're all going to have to take a look at. But it goes back to prioritizing new expenditures. It's all great to have a brand new facility and stuff like that, but you have to make sure that the costs to maintain it are there because if you don't, then you will have to maintain it, and then you're spreading yourself thinner and thinner all the time.
Okay.
I have a couple of budget questions. One word that sort of preceded you from the time the former city manager retired or resigned or whatever was the word transparency. We've heard it a lot on this show from council members, and I don't know whether you've heard it or not, but it seems to me one of the areas that needs more transparency is the budget process. You don't have a budget committee. It comes to the department heads and the council members, late in the year, and the process isn't really very sophisticated. Council members read in and they have their own questions, but it seems to me we need more transparency with the budget. And I'm wondering whether you've ever worked with standing budget committees as town administrators.
No, not necessarily budget committees,
Okay.
but it really comes down to the process.
Okay.
One of the things that I've always liked to do is have a budget visioning session, and I used the word vision. I said I wasn't going to do that, and maybe I don't know if I've necessarily used that word. I call it a budget preparation or a pre-budget kickoff type of thing, and talking to the council as a whole about, here's where we are mid-year before we even get started. Here's where we stand. Where this is good, this is not so good. We're doing well here, we're not doing well
Kind
there.
of a halftime report.
Kind of, or it's the pregame show,
The
really,
pregame show,
and really give an idea of this is what we project coming for the year. As bad as levy limits are, the one advantage is we know what we're not going to get next year. So every community in the state, especially in this economy, most communities are going to be 2%.
Yeah.
Grand Chute, for all you've heard about Grand Chute. Grand Chute's 2% next year, just like Oshkosh. I mean, everybody's at that. So we're all in this together type of thing. And one of the things I like to show is, here's what 2% gets you. We know what 2% of last year's number is. We can communicate that today. We really could have communicated back on January 1. So it's getting that process out early. And you have a budget staff that's doing those things. They know what that 2% number is. They already know it, and they already have a good idea of where the revenues are going to be. Revenues, even in a down economy, you can pretty much project because it's a model. You put a model in a computer, you figure it out, and say, okay, this is where I think we're going to be. You verify it, and this is where the holistic approach is. Because building permits, you got to talk to community development. How are building permits doing? And you do bring all those things in. So you can give at the pregame show.
I like that idea.
And a forecast. This is where we think we're going to be next year already.
Right.
So one of the things that I've used in the past is you call a budget a resource allocation plan. Sounds real corny, but it's like this is what we got, and this is what we're facing next year. Insurance is killing us, fuel's killing us, utilities are killing us. How are we going to balance those things out? So we will give a forecast. So where does transparency come? Well, the pregame show, the quarterback's hurt. Not a good forecast.
No, but it is transparency.
It's transparency, and everybody knows.
Yeah.
And it's amazing what happens in Vegas when they know the quarterback's down.
That's right.
Or if the quarterback's coming back, or whatever our strengths are, whatever our
Brett coming
weaknesses
back?
are. Yeah, is Brett coming back? There's a big question, But the transparency thing, it really is more communication and keeping people on the heads up. Transparency is kind of a new word,
It is.
but it really is a new term for just keeping people in the loop on what's going on.
And we've found
I
far
have
too
one
often
more
that
budget
hasn't.
thing, and I'll
Yep.
be quiet. Oshkosh, I think, lacks a cultural supporter at City Hall. When things get tough, the police and fire always come out on top, and the cultural pillars, the library, the museum, and the Grand Opera House, come in last. And, why don't we put cultural things as part of economic development? You mentioned earlier about the person who wanted to go to Berlin so that their child could take German. I mean, these are really pillars of strength, and I don't see that happening.
Well, any of the cultural amenities that we have, they're classic targets because they're not health and safety, and health and safety do come to the forefront. If you do a survey of the community, police and fire are always coming up on top, as well they should be.
Yes.
We formed as a community for health and safety purposes. But as we evolved and as we grew, we said, it would really be nice if this community had fill in the blank. And Oshkosh has some wonderful amenities. One of the reasons I am looking forward to coming here is because of those amenities. But I got to put on my budget hat every once in a while and say, what are our priorities? And that's why I say if we're going to do some expansion or do something new, we have to have a funding source to take care of it. So part of it will be to challenge the cultural community, and I think Oshkosh has stepped up for the most part in this, is finding a way to help maintain these new facilities we have. Because they will become run down, and they will need they're only going to need somebody at the door to welcome them. Whether they charge admission or not is almost insignificant when you take a look at it. But how are we going to make sure that the light bulbs are changed and the floors mopped and the crack in the sidewalk or the walls taken care of? If you start letting those things go, that's when you're spreading yourself too thin. So you have to be careful with those things. But I think that the cultural amenities you cited really define us as a community and what we value in our community. But you got to get back to health and safety. And elected officials' primary role is health and safety. So that's why you have to focus on those things. But once you've made a decision that you're going to have an outstanding museum, an outstanding library, well, then you better be ready to step up and maintain those things for the long term and make them the jewel that you've envisioned that they would be in the first place.
Talking about budgets, Mark, do you think that any money could be possibly found or some unnecessary expenditures be cut out of the budget if we went to a true zero-based budget? I know we've heard from administration in the past that we have a zero-based budget, but a true zero-based budget starts at zero and then you add in your core services and so on and so forth. What's your philosophy on a zero-based budget?
Well, I guess I'll have to take a look at what that is. I've always, felt budget's been one of my strengths. When I've used zero-based budgeting, it's usually on the capital side because there's no guarantee that we're going to do $1 million worth of anything next year. Just because you got 3 squad cars this year doesn't mean you get 3 next year. You really take a look at those things. From a capital expenditure standpoint, I probably more philosophically zero-based budgeting. But when you come to operations, there's a certain base of services that the community has come to expect. And I'm certainly going to rely on the managers to say, are there any other ways we could do things to reallocate things? But most communities really go back to the old, what they call the incremental approach to budgeting. I'm not necessarily an advocate of that. I always try to take a look at more of a performance-based budget. What are we setting to accomplish? Starting with your goal, what's your mission, and then what are your objectives for this year? And where are you allocating your resources to achieve those objectives for this year? And then show me how. Have you done it? And it's all well and good that we do something very efficiently, but if the public really doesn't care about that service, it really is going to be an issue of prioritizing those things. So I'm probably more of a performance-based budget person, but I don't know if I'm going to put your audience to sleep if I get into too much of that discussion.
Well, we're running out of time anyway, so not a whole lot of time for anyone to fall asleep.
Well, then that means I have to come back, okay?
That's right. But, in the remaining minutes that we have, maybe you can address this. Labor costs are the hugest part of any community's budget. And, one of the things that we've been hearing from some people in the community, and you certainly know that, health insurance costs are skyrocketing. People want, at least some people in the community would like to see city employees paying more of their health insurance premiums. And we've had several unions who have gone to arbitration. Most have won. The firefighters, we just learned today, lost their arbitration bid. But, I think that people have the misconception that you as city manager can do something to change this. And under state law, under state law you can't. But can you put some gentle pressure on the unions to help make them understand, the situation that the taxpayers are in? And maybe massage them, to use your word, into paying a little bit more in the way of health insurance premiums?
That's a long process, and I wish I had I could wave my magic hand and achieve it. Clearly, we're all stuck in this situation where healthcare is a major issue, and that goes way beyond Oshkosh. It's our whole society, and we're going to have to address that issue. I don't know the personalities of the union, and I'll really have to get familiar with that. The mediation arbitration law in the state is something that needs to get looked at. That goes well beyond Oshkosh. Part of my responsibility is to represent Oshkosh at the state level to our state representatives, letting them know, look, here are some of the drawbacks, because the fact that we may have won this arbitration with the fire union today, the state loves to promote the fact that they have an almost perfect 50-50 batting average with siding with management or union. So the cynical part of me says, well, we won that one, but we're going to lose the next one. So it really goes beyond us. To the degree I can help educate the employees and make them aware of how healthcare costs impact services, I believe that most public employees recognize the dilemma we're in. Sometimes their organizations may not want to recognize that, but as individuals, they really do understand that, and it's a matter of educating. I put out a weekly newsletter, typically to the council, just to keep them up on things. And as I come across issues like that, I share that information not just with the council, but with the rest of the organization. This is the reality out there, but it goes well beyond it. It really is an issue at the state level of the meet ARB laws, and there has to be some reform at that level.
Okay. Well, I had to ask the question because it was on my list, but
No, that's good.
a viewer had also asked me and said, can't he do anything? And I said, well, I'll ask the question. So, real quickly, wireless internet. A lot of communities are moving toward that as a total infrastructure type thing. Your thoughts on something like that? Not that we don't have enough things to spend.
I've read a lot about it, and actually, Grant Chute worked very closely with our area communities. We were a very small player, but the City of Appleton, Outagamie County, Fox Valley Technical College, and Appleton Area School District in Grant Chute, we formed a group to take a look at a pilot project. One of the things we did learn is that public wireless isn't necessarily very successful at a public venue. Private public wireless does work, but we have looked at, and we are going to be looking at doing a pilot project for municipal applications, and we've actually selected the College Avenue corridor from way over on the east side of Appleton all the way out to Outagamie County Airport, because we identified that corridor as being close enough that Wi-Fi is feasible for municipal purposes.
Okay.
If we can get it going for municipal purposes and show that it's cost effective there, then you can maybe get, and I think you're probably looking at the public Wi-Fi end of things. That's a little harder to come. And with Starbucks closing, we're losing all our Wi-Fis.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, but we will take you up on your generous offer to come back.
You got 3 or 4 more pages of questions.
I know, we do, but we'll save them for another time. So
that's fine.
Maybe after you're on the job, like 120 days or something.
Yeah. You're going to count them up for me, huh?
Sure.
Cheryl,
Anyway, thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.